Hi folks, the Filipina P here, and it's time for another mailbag video. It's been so long since I did one that I actually have a backlog of emails, and I've gotten so many interesting questions that I might just have to do another one of these on Friday. As always, you guys have gotten yourselves into some pretty nasty jams, so I'll do my best to help you out. Today we have a man with a Filipina whose husband reappeared without warning. A guy who's literally being stalked by several Filipinas at once. And a man who's being pressured to marry his sister-in-law. All I can say is, get ready for a wild ride. So the first email is from blank in blank. Dear P, due to the fact that I'm still in the Philippines and this is a recent situation, I'm going to leave out my name and location for privacy purposes. I met a Filipina on a popular dating site, and things worked out so well between us online that I decided to pay her a visit a few months after first chatting. She told me she was separated and had an 8-year-old son. I asked specifically about the status of her baby daddy, and she said he abandoned them when the baby was 6 months old. At that time, he hadn't been in contact since then, and the rumor was that he had a new woman and kids on a different island. She lived in a small town in the province, so I rented a condo in the nearby big city, and I also rented a car. Upon our first meeting, things went perfectly. She showed me around, and we had quite a few memorable outings. She spent over a week at my condo, and her son even stayed over and used the swimming pool for a couple of days. Then she took me to meet her family, which also went well. When I asked her family about her ex, they reluctantly deferred to my girl for the answers. Other than that little red flag, everything else was good. Her son and I seemed to have a bond, and the rest of her family accepted me. She brought up the fact that her son's birthday was coming up, so I reserved a lechon, an ice cream vendor, and a cake, and the rest of her siblings helped however they could. The party was going to be at her parents' house, which doubled as a sari-sari store. When the big day came, her son was very excited because he'd never had a birthday party like this. His homies were there very early, and her siblings were scurrying about preparing things. All of a sudden, a barangay official showed up with the baby daddy. The grandparents went berserk, yelling, screaming, and pointing. The official came up to me and told me I had to leave and that I did not belong there. The son did not recognize the sperm donor, which caught the barangay official off guard. He asked me why I was there, and I said I was giving this young man his first birthday party. This triggered the deadbeat dad, who started yelling and making demands of the official. During that time, the lechon arrived, and that was being set up as the centerpiece. The official came back to me and again politely asked me to leave. I didn't understand a word that was being said, but no translation was needed. My girlfriend was livid. Her son was crying and wanted nothing to do with the deadbeat dad, and the grandparents were hysterical. I stepped away and spoke with my girlfriend's younger sister. I told her I had to leave, and I gave her all the 1,000 peso bills in my pocket to cover the party expenses. Then I got in my car and drove off. My girlfriend called me and tried to get me to come back. I told her it was obviously inappropriate and that they should continue the party without me. I told her that she needed to focus on her son and to call me back when everything calmed down. I got back to my condo and told the security guards what happened. That's when it was explained to me what separated meant in the Philippines. They suggested I never see my girl again, which hit me hard, but I understood the ramifications and that I was actually breaking the law. The next morning, I got a call from my girl, who was at the condo security gate, but the guards wouldn't let her in. I asked her not to come back and told her it was over between us. She was upset, but I knew that a relationship with her was going to be a dead end street lined with deadbeat daddy drama. At the end of my stay, I said my goodbyes to the staff at the condo. I saw a couple of the women crying as they waved their goodbyes. I told them I was going to be okay and there was no need to cry. A young female security guard explained that it wasn't me they were sad about. It was the single mother and her son they were sad for. They had an opportunity for a better life, and it was taken from them. Please tell others my story and let them know what separated means. Urge them to get the Senamor form to be sure they're not dating a married woman and what can happen to them if they don't. I don't think my situation is unique, so maybe my tragedy will help others. Wow. Well, I'm certainly sorry to hear that, my friend. And instead of asking a question, it sounds like you want me to use your experience as a warning. So that's what I'll do. As most of my regular viewers know by now, it's illegal to date a married Filipina, including ones who are separated. What happened to this man is the least of your worries. Instead of showing up at the birthday party, if he'd shown up at her house and found you two in bed, he could have used the crime of passion law and shot you both dead. He could also file adultery charges and have you put in jail, or even extort you for money by threatening you with legal action. Is it worth the risk? Not in my book. Don't date married women. But this next guy has a problem with dating in general. Alan B. from Bacolod writes, Dear P, why does this keep happening to me? I'm hardly a catch, and I've never been what you call irresistible to women. But ever since I arrived in the Philippines, I've had a string of bizarre interactions with Filipinas. The first girl I dated simply wouldn't leave my hotel room, and I physically had to stuff her inside a cab and send her away. The next morning, when I left my room, there she was in the hallway wanting to talk to me. I had to run past her and down a flight of steps to escape. After I moved into a condo, I dated a girl just a few times before it was obvious that it wasn't gonna work out. When I told her I didn't want to continue things, it's like her personality split into two parts. At first, she got angry and I had to block her from texting me. But then I kept finding handwritten love letters on my doorstep, begging to talk to me again. When that didn't work, she started telling nasty rumors about me all over town. Uh oh. No matter where I go, it seems like I keep bumping into her, and I'm starting to suspect that it's not by accident. If this doesn't stop, I might even fear for my safety. I guess I could go to the police, but I'm new here, so I'm reluctant to make a scene, and I get the feeling that most people won't take it seriously anyway. Are all Filipinos like this, or am I just really unlucky? And how do I handle it? Oh, Alan, what have you gotten yourself into? Okay, first let me say that not all Filipinos are like this. And you've got some equally wacky women in the West. But yes, this kind of thing is not so uncommon here. Now, you didn't say specifically, but since you mentioned hotel rooms and condos and next mornings, I'm going to assume that even though you just went on a few dates with these women, you also slept with them, right? Okay, I'm not excusing their behavior, but let me explain something about Filipinas, especially provincial ones. In our world, if we have sex with someone, then we sometimes think that we already have a de facto relationship, and it's not uncommon for us to continue the pursuit. That's one reason why we sometimes jump into bed faster than we should. Because we think that if we do, we're already halfway down the aisle. I know that sounds crazy to you, but I'm just telling it like it is. As far as what you can do about it, you're right. You're kind of right. You could go to the police with all the evidence you collected and file a bunch of restraining orders. But I understand why you don't want to go down that road, especially if you're trying to fit in here. To be honest, they probably wouldn't do a lot of good anyway, and the last thing you want to do is start a feud with her clan. My advice? Keep a low profile until your lease is up. And if you're still having serious problems, consider moving. I know that's not the advice most other people are gonna give you, but in this case, it's the safest. And the good thing about the Philippines is that it's easy to disappear. Best of luck, Alan, and let's hope you find a way to tone down that animal magnetism of yours. Our final email of the day comes from Tony P, who's also here in the Philippines, but doesn't say where. Tony writes, Miss P, I find myself in a most unusual situation, and I'd really like to see what you have to say about it. But first, I have to tell you the backstory. I came to this country to marry a Filipina almost 6 years ago. We purchased a house and started a family with a son who's now almost 4 and a daughter who just turned 2. Shortly after giving birth to our little girl, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer, and in almost no time at all, she passed away. My wife was the greatest thing that ever happened to me, an amazing woman who lived with God at the center of her life and who possessed a boundless love and kindness for her kids and family. I feel very lost and alone without her, not to mention that my children now have no mother. For the past year, I've been going through a period of mourning, but I realized for the sake of the kids, I need to consider my options for the future, none of which are very promising. I could take the children back to the US and raise them as a single dad, but I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And although they'd have a shot at a good future economically, they'd be away from their only extended family. I could stay in the Philippines and look for another wife. But I heard you say in one of your videos that sometimes Filipinas have trouble accepting another woman's kids and loving them like their own. Blending them with another family fills me with dread because there's no way to know what I'm dragging them into. Whatever I do, it has to be in the best interest of my children. But now there seems to be a third choice, as her family has approached me with another option. My kids have always been close with my wife's family, especially with her younger sister, who they almost see as their second mother. The sister is unmarried, college educated, and a wonderful woman in her own right. By this point, I think you can guess what the family has in mind. They're proposing that I marry my late wife's younger sister, which is an option I never even considered, and which makes me feel very uncomfortable. I can analyze some of the pluses and minuses, but there are a lot of unknowns that I need your help with. On the plus side, marrying the sister would keep the family mostly intact and cause the least stress for my kids. They couldn't have a better stepmother, and there's already a deep love between them. She's already been vetted by 6 years of observation, and I know she's a quality woman. The negative side of things consists mainly of my feelings about the whole thing. I've known this woman since she was in college and never once looked at her in that way. I do love her, but as a sister in law. There was a bit of an age gap between me and my late wife, but now there will be an even bigger one between me and her sister. Despite the fact that she's agreeable to all this, the thought of living as man and wife just feels wrong, an impression I'm not sure I can ever shake. And even though it seems like a practical solution, it's more of an arranged marriage than a natural one. I'd really like to know your thoughts on this, and if you could please answer one of the most important questions of all. What will the children think as they grow up? Is this something they'll accept in this culture, or will they be teased and shamed by their friends, and ultimately be ashamed of their dad? Wow, Tony, this is probably one of the most moving emails I've ever received. And again, I'm so sorry for your loss. I would certainly never presume to tell you who to marry, so I assume you're asking me about the cultural ramifications, and I might just be able to help you with that, even though it's a sticky situation. There's one thing I'm certain of, however, that you're really concerned about what's best for your kids. I can hear it in almost every word you write, and for that, you have my respect no matter what you choose to do. One of the things you mentioned was the importance of God in your wife's life. I'm assuming she was probably Catholic, which means there's a good chance that you are too. So the first thing I looked into was what the Bible says about the situation. I checked a lot of scripture, and to be honest, I seem to find conflicting rules, but that's probably just because I'm no Bible scholar. The good news is that I'm sure a lot of folks out there will come to my rescue and tell you what the good book says about it. If that's not something you're concerned with, let's talk about how Filipino culture sees it. There's actually a word for having relationships with multiple women in the same family: tuhog. It's regarded as bad luck and something to be avoided. The only possible exception is when the family supports it, as in your case. It's still a little scandalous, but the important element is the family's approval. If it's their idea, at least you know your decision to marry the sister won't cause any turmoil within the clan, which is definitely a positive factor in your favor. But here's where it gets tricky. Filipino families are masters at rewriting history when they need to. And the same will be true of your relationship. Children are often told that their aunts are their moms, that their cousins are their brothers, whatever's the most convenient lie to save face. Her family is liable to circle the wagons around the truth and sweep it under the rug with all the other anomalies in the family tree. And trust me, there are almost always anomalies in Filipino family trees. And this is where the conflict might arise, because my advice is to not let that happen. Own it. Don't lie about it. Because in the age of DNA, you can count on their discovering the truth anyway. If you want to protect your kids from stress and shock, finding out their mom isn't their mom is not something you want to put them through. Just explain the situation and be confident about it. If you're cool with it, then they'll be cool with it. The problem is, you're going to have to convince the family to do the same and abandon their natural tendency to obfuscate. It's a deal you should make before you agree to marry the sister, and I do it in no uncertain terms. As far as your kids getting teased or shamed, here's the truth. It largely depends on where you live. Are you staying right next to her family in a provincial area? If so, then be aware that nasty neighbors will tell their kids all about your situation, and their kids will bully your kids. If you live in a city, or at least in a different province, no one will even question it, and it'll never be an issue. But as long as you arm your kids with the truth and teach them it's okay, then they won't have to hide behind a hurtful lie. And finally, I tried to think of this from your late wife's perspective. And if it were me, I'd want my kids to be raised by my sister rather than a stranger, for whatever that's worth. The saying that blood is thicker than water has never been more true than in this case. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a billion different opinions in the comment section, and maybe folks will say something you can use to help you decide. Most of them are going to be Western opinions, so you'll have to decide which ones don't apply. I wish you and the kids the very best, and I hope you'll keep me updated. Well, that's it for this episode. And if you like these emails, just wait till you see what I've got for you on Friday as this double shot of mailbag continues. Till then, folks. If you think about it, I'm kind of like a teacher, providing knowledge about the Philippines twice a week. My course covers many different subjects, including the psychology of dealing with the local inhabitants, the mathematics of constructing a workable budget, and even biology with the sometimes bizarre mating habits of the Filipina. All I ask for this higher education is that you subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell so you're never late for class, and check out my Patreon page for extra content and exclusive features. And while you're waiting for your next lesson, it might be a good idea to study the other course material. Because after grading your last exam, I'm afraid I'm gonna need you to stay after class for a little cramming session. Are you ready?